Welcome to the Funnel Reboot Podcast with your host, Glenn Schmeltzley. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here, and welcome to Funnel Reboot, the show for analytically minded marketers. Whether you're just here for the first time or you've been coming back again and again, I'm so glad you're here. Let's get straight into today's topic. You could say that the marketing field's going through exciting times right now, but it wouldn't be fair to say that everything's rosy. Here are some examples of issues we've got. There's the use of SaaS by marketing, which may have freed us from being chained to the IT department, but after 25 years of binge buying all these point solutions, we're saddled with loads of technical debt and the order to treat customer data as private information, meaning we should repatriate it from all these servers. CMOs are tasked so much with explaining technology out there, much of their time is used up by C-suite questions, and that leaves little time for them to manage their own marketing. There's the question of whether the agency-client relationship will survive under AI. Some say that brands won't need an agency, as they'll generate all their own creative. And agencies like Publicis, though, who've poured huge sums into their media platform CoreAI, say you need them because they monitor billions of customer signals and can inform what ads should be made when and where. Our field also doesn't have a standardized accreditation, and so our terminology isn't uniform. We make dialects for our company or industry's use. How's that working for us? It's working about as well as it did for those building the Tower of Babel. These issues are all brought up by my guest, Myles Younger, who's head of innovation and insights at U of Digital. Since graduating from Northeastern 20 years ago, he's been up and down the marketing industry block. He was a client-side marketer in the tech and FinServe sectors. He founded and led an ad tech company, Canned Banners, that was later acquired. He worked as a VP at data consultancy Mighty Hive, which became Media Monks. He believes that talking openly about these things and educating people on all the changes happening with different formats and learners and markets is what marketing needs right now. To me, he's something of a modern-day David Ogilvy, who wrote his thoughts on the marketing industry back in the day in a book called Confessions of an Ad Man. Myles is just as outspoken on digital media today, and the opinions he voices in trade publications and podcasts comes across as prophecies about this industry, and sometimes pleas for how it could be better. I caught up with him in Portland, Oregon, where he lives with his wife and 3 kids. Let's go talk to Myles Younger. I'm really glad to welcome Myles Younger. Welcome to Funnel Reboot, Myles.
Thanks a lot, Glenn.
You are known for having an opinion or 3 on things. You have had a chance to observe from a couple of different places in the world of marketing and in the world of technology. Maybe let's just start with one of the main prevailing themes that has been coming at us in the last 5 years, and that's the notion of privacy and regulation and the division that people try to make between data that everybody should, as an advertiser, be entitled to, like first-party data, versus those, second and third parties that, seem to be perhaps getting rolled away from existence. You kind of portrayed it, I saw it as a kind of a fuzzy continuum. You don't say that it's exactly, oh, well, the line between what we should have is here. I recall you kind of were going at it saying, okay, well, as we look at the data, we definitely have firsthand. We have certainty, but as we, get away from that edge of things, we seem to have less certainty. Give me your take on that.
Yeah. I think this is a case where I was framing types of data using the physics concept of the Heisenberg
Right.
uncertainty principle, where just to remind everybody, and I'm probably going to mess it up myself, paraphrasing the definition of this physics concept, but it's that the Heisenberg uncertainty principle says that you cannot know the I believe it is the location and velocity of a particle at the same time. You can only know one or the other. If you learn
Uh-huh.
one, then you unlearn the other. And so I was applying that to the concept of marketing data, where the more certainty you expect to have over a data set, the more scale you are going to give up. And that this is just inherently true for many reasons, but it is that idea that you have to give up certainty in exchange for scale
Uh-huh.
is and was somewhat antithetical to the promise of, say, ad tech and to some extent martech of, say, 10 to 15 years ago, where the promise was that we could have our cake and eat it too, and we could have massive scale in terms of numbers of consumer eyeballs and earballs and everything,
That
while
we're all
also
uniquely
having, yeah,
identified.
yes, exactly. That we have marketers or ad tech or data brokers, whoever, can have a high degree of certainty as to, that Glenn is Glenn on
Yep.
this device and on that device and on this other device, and we can perfectly frequency cap across those devices. We can perfectly display a sequence of ads. The ads can be, perfectly personalized according to Glenn or Miles's behaviors, both online and offline, and then we could do that massive scale. And so, what I was saying is that no, for many many reasons, there just is a trade-off. If you want broad reach, you are going to have to give up certainty, meaning that there is some inherent waste in reaching audiences at large scale, which, like I said, is just kind of antithetical to the classic promise of ad tech and really
Of
of like
digital.
digital marketing
Yeah.
as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was the bludgeon that digital used to bash legacy media, saying
Right.
to them, you can't measure who
Right.
you're seeing, who's seeing your
Right.
ad. So, I mean, you pop that balloon, and I suppose what I'm wondering is, do we say then, okay, well then there's no point to ad tech? Like we have to, I guess, look at the nuances here. We can't just
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
say, it's all or nothing.
Yeah. No. 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 There's definitely not. This doesn't mean that there's no point to ad tech. In one sense, there is a competitive aspect to it, where if I as an advertiser or as a tech company can reduce waste to some extent, or de-risk campaigns in some way, or improve the scale of deterministic audiences, then that essentially raises the bar for the entire industry. So even if the solution isn't perfect, you essentially have kicked off an arms race of incremental improvements. But those incremental improvements will never reach the overall promise of digital, which was sort of this godlike certainty over what was happening everywhere at all times. So even those incremental improvements can spawn entire new industry segments.
Hmm.
And so I think even from that aspect, because if you're a CMO or something, and you are buying legacy media, that you broadcast media, print media, whatever, out of home, radio, and that there is inherent waste in that. If there is a technology that is going to allow you to de-risk those media buys by either doing them digitally or incorporating some technology, middleman, as it were, somewhere along the food chain, you're probably going to do it because
Yeah.
that de-risking might add up to hundreds of thousands or even millions, tens of millions of dollars in savings that can be plowed back into your campaigns and drive more growth. So you're going to do it even though it's not perfect.
So you make concessions. I mean, data clean rooms,
Yeah.
I guess, fits in that category. Some DSPs use some, interesting, ways of removing the advertiser from the end inventory. So, yeah, I guess deciding that you can settle for those things may be what an advertiser who needs that kind of reach will have. The dependence on the tools themselves, um, and that this kind of decade-long run where we kind of sprouted this, 10,000 company,
Hmm.
legion of all these point solutions. Where do you think we are in that whole cycle? Um, are we at a trough of disillusionment? Have we kind of just said, oh, no, they're not all good, they're not all bad, they just are? Or are we at the beginning of a next large phase where something else is going to come along and perhaps disrupt them just like they disrupted what came before?
Yeah, I, I, I think we're ripe for some form of disruption. It could come from multiple angles. The first of which is, so, you think about digital as a whole is about 30 years old now. Prior to 30 years ago, there was no such thing as digital marketing. There was no email, there were no web browsers, there were certainly no smartphones, anything like that. There were no connected televisions.
Yeah.
And so it's only 30 years old. And so it makes sense that you would have this sort of Cambrian explosion of companies because over that 30 years, the barriers to starting an ad tech or a martech company have just continued to come down and down and down. Succeeding is still a high barrier, but starting the company has just gone down and down and down. Anybody with a credit card and access to AWS or Azure or Google Cloud
Yep.
Platform can start an ad tech company in a matter of like weeks. I'm being glib there, but the barrier really
No,
is
but
quite
wherever you
it,
speak. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
2010,
yeah,
didn't you do
yeah,
something like that?
yeah, yes, yes. When I say any idiot can start an ad tech company, I'm an idiot and I started an ad tech company. Um, um, and so the barrier, when you lower the barrier to entry to an industry, of course, you get a lot of entrance to the industry. And when an industry is new, you have a lot of companies starting up in that industry. You go back to the early days of like the automotive industry, and I don't know the numbers off the top of my
Right. But
head,
there
but
were
y-
many.
yeah, there was like hundreds of people making cars, and they all eventually consolidated down to
Yeah.
the big three, at least American automakers, as it were, and that took a little while. But the fact was, any carriage maker or mechanic or anybody could sort of start a car company and start making cars for people. And so I think on the one hand, so you've had this Cambrian explosion, which is not surprising, but I think there is a limit to how far it can go because I think there's a limit to how much tech. So all of this technology spawns tech and organizational debt within the customers of these companies. So
Yeah.
if you're a CMO and you're running your stack was 20 technologies, then it's 30, then it's 40, then it's 50, then it's 100, and you're having to manage all this. Your teams are having to manage it. You're having to work with your IT counterparts on it, and legal, and product, and it just gets overwhelmingly complex at a certain point. And I don't know exactly what the point is, but I think organizations are probably reaching that point right now where they are literally saturated with technology in terms of martech and ad tech, and you can see this where usage rates are starting to decline. I think it's Gartner's research has been they've been
Mm,
looking at that for a couple of years, looking at martech usage rates as the size of marketers stacks in terms of the number of technologies they're using is increasing, their usage rate is decreasing. It makes perfect sense if you understand how complex these technologies are and how
yes.
complex it is to run multiple of them in parallel, meaning you have to hire different staff, you have to hire different agency partners. They all have to talk to each other, which is very, very difficult for them to do. You, as the marketer, have to stay on top of it all and report on all of it and orchestrate all of it and plan all of it. It's just incredibly complex. So that's one aspect of it that I think is ready for a a disruption. Is just it's almost like this bottoms up thing where it's like, yeah, top down, there will be consolidation in the industry. The biggest players will acquire the little ones.
That's
People will
on
go
the
out of business.
that's on the vendor side, but what I'm
Yeah,
hearing you hint at is there
yeah,
are things happening inside of client orgs.
yes,
What I see are, it's kind of hilarious because if we zoom back 10, 15 years, the CMO was, uh, rubbing their hands together with glee, thinking, oh, there are these point solutions. This is great. I don't
Yeah.
need the CIO anymore. I can just
Yep.
pop a credit card in and get
Yep.
us going.
Yep.
Now it seems the CMO is begging the CIO, please take some of this off our hands.
Yes.
I can't handle it anymore. And the CIO has probably been saying, well, I told you all along, you weren't thinking about data governance. You
Right.
weren't thinking about tech debt, you
Yep.
know?
Yeah.
And one thing that I imagine the CIO is probably, taking the high ground or has an upper hand in is AI, because they're seeing this come along in many
Yeah.
ways. And they're looking at the CMO going, well, we're now going to have systems that will write for themselves the capabilities of dozens of the point solutions you have, and we
Yes.
will do it all at once. So
Yep.
how about that?
Yeah, so that was going to be my next point in terms of whatever
Vectors,
the next vector
vectors
for
of
disruption
attack.
is
Yeah,
yeah is AI. And I realize that you and I are only the umpteenth millionth people to kind of point at AI as being disruptive. I think generally people agree it's going to be pretty disruptive, and yeah, it's it's going to totally turn, because all of these ad tech and martech companies and technologies are optimized to the assumption that there are human beings sitting at keyboards hitting buttons inside of you self-serve UIs. And
yep,
that is the assumption for how these technology companies are built from an engineering standpoint, how they make their money, how their partnerships are set up, how they service their clients, how their internal organizations are set up. Everything is predicated on this assumption that there is some human being somewhere, probably multiple of them, punching buttons to make things happen inside this tech. And what happens when that human being either is no longer there, or instead of punching buttons inside of 3 technologies, now they're sort of using an AI to manage 30. And one thing that occurred to me, this is literally just yesterday, I think I was thinking about this, is um, if you think about the fact that let's assume that nobody needs to punch buttons inside Martech anymore.
okay,
Ever again, nobody needs to sit and punch a button. You literally can talk to an AI agent as if it were a human employee. So it's almost as if someone's punching the buttons, but it's not a human. It's just an AI is doing it digitally. And so you're just talking to this AI and sort of issuing commands at it. You're not really going to tell the AI which buttons to push. You're just going to treat the AI as if they were your direct report, and you're just going to tell them what outcome you want.
right,
Like I don't know. We need to pivot our strategy to acquire more traffic to this thing, or we need more signups over here, or we need more sales of this thing. And can you please just make that happen? And in that world, one of the interesting things about SaaS in general, so this isn't specific to MarTech, and one of the beautiful things about SaaS from a commercial standpoint, if you're a SaaS vendor, is you push most of the risk of your tool set off onto the user. You say, hey, we gave you all the buttons. You have all the
right,
buttons, and you pay us a fee of, or so maybe it's usage based, maybe it's per seat, maybe it's fixed, whatever. But you pay us for the buttons, and we give you the buttons, and you're going to use the buttons to succeed. The success is on you. You got to push the buttons in
correct.
the right way to succeed. And what happens when an AI is pushing the buttons, and the AI, that model starts to fall apart, because those SaaS vendors may have to start taking on more risk for the outcome. When the button pushing is no longer the special thing, it's handled by AI. It's like, well, that's no longer a special thing. We don't, the customer is going to say, well, we don't really need SaaS anymore. There ain't nobody here pushing the buttons. So what do you got for us other than a shiny UI that we can access from a web browser?
It's
Can
true.
you make an outcome happen for us? And what do we have to pay for that outcome? And what happens to that SaaS vendor if they can't deliver the outcome? Because right now, SaaS vendors, they don't have to deliver outcomes. It's a total selling shovels to gold miners model. And
Hmm.
I'm not predicting that it's going to shift, but it did occur to me that it might shift when all the gold miners become robots and nobody needs shovels anymore.
Yeah, that the vendors, well, they're at a fork in the road, and depending how many rounds of venture capital they have, and what their next thing looks like, if they haven't
But
already IPO'd, they probably
y-
have to come up with a new game plan like that.
yeah, yeah. Well, and yeah, that's the other thing is the going back and um, taking legacy SaaS code bases and modifying them for an AI era. There's just going to be a ton of companies going to go out of business over the next 5, 10 years. They're just not going to be able to do it. It's too much legacy code to update. It's too hard to pivot an entire business from one fundamental set of assumptions over to another fundamental set of assumptions. And so you're going to have a lot of newer companies kind of over the next 5 to 10 years come in and just eat the lunches of everybody who's sitting on that legacy code base that was optimized for human users.
Just an observation on that. I mean, some of them may be fleet of foot. Yes, others of them, and I would, let's just whip on Salesforce here for a moment, because why not? But they would probably be one of the slower ones. But I think, you know, really, regardless of which of your outcomes you just said there,
Yeah.
the other dance partner in this picture are the users. And,
Hmm.
there are many times where the SaaS company is rate limited by how fast its users can keep
Yeah.
up.
Oh, yep.
Take it, take it
Uh,
away.
so it's funny that you should say sort of the rate limited by the user. So my dad was a computer programmer going back to the 70s, and that was one of the things he used to say to me as a little kid when he was sort of trying to explain very fundamental concepts with computers. Is he says the computer is spending most of its time waiting on you.
Right.
No human can hit keys as fast as a computer can think. It's spending most of its time just waiting on you to hit the next key. We have computers,
Sidebar, you must have had a
yeah,
very interesting childhood.
yeah. So no, they're totally rate limited. I mean, and so yeah, if we just stick with Martech, whatever, you take Salesforce as an example, you know, yeah, the users are a total other vector in this because like this could go in so many different directions because first of all, those users themselves are an entrenched constituency at this point. If you
Yep.
just take Salesforce users, I mean, man, they pre-COVID, Dreamforce was attracting like 150,000 people to San Francisco. This is a massive constituency of professionals. Firstly, these people aren't just going to like roll over and like lose their jobs to AI
No,
or kind of
and hilarious little thing. You may be interested or may already know this, but I believe that a phrase that Salesforce admins in companies used to use to uh, connote how they did their work is they called themselves push button admins as opposed to
they,
coders.
yeah,
So
sure.
that's kind of hilarious.
I, well, I mean, it just goes to show you sort of like the how, and again, we'll just stick with Martech, but you could paint all of SaaS with this same brush. So it's not just
Yes.
Martech that this is
We
true.
need the
Is like,
power user. Some of the power
yeah,
users will become admins.
yeah,
They will write the PO for our next
yeah,
contract,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's a
And
nice pull strategy.
no, and well, and the original promise of the entire thing was that you wouldn't need these gatekeepers because it was going to democratize access for everyone to these systems.
Yeah,
And it
right.
and it has. It's not as it hasn't democratized it, but getting back to what I was saying earlier is what no one accounted for is the explosion of complexity that Martech itself would spawn,
Yeah.
where you do need these admins and you do need specialists and you do end up with gatekeepers because it's complex and only a
Yeah.
small number of people inside a particular organization truly understand how to make these systems do what it is, whatever that the CMO wants or the VP wants or the director wants them to do. These people who are really never hands on keyboard, but they understand the strategy, they understand sort of the goal that needs to be accomplished.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the user communities for Martech are to me fascinating. It'll be fascinating to understand how AI interplays with the human communities that already are sort of thriving in the world of Martech in particular.
Yeah. The like a case in point for me on that community part is within one company, and I notice it normally gets catalyzed by a discussion about system A and an API to another system in like system B. And
Yeah.
that's where you see people just like lose their mind. They uh it all of a sudden a whole bunch of meetings are booked. We got to talk about
Oh,
this. This
oh
is
yeah.
and then
And
we're like, well, I don't understand what your system does because I've been busy
I,
on my own system. So now
yep.
we're
Yep.
we're spending a whole lot of time just explaining to each other.
I, yeah, there are not enough waking hours in a human lifetime anymore for people to understand all of the other counterparty systems and teams and business goals and restrictions and all of that that we have now constructed around ourselves in the digital marketing advertising media world. And it's funny you should mention APIs because that's another one where over the course of digital with a capital D, for, let's call it for the last 30 years,
Sure.
sort of the web era of digital, is we have collectively as an industry, the tech industry has steadily done its best to democratize these technologies, to tear down walls, to remove friction. And
Mm,
web-based UIs was a big one. I mean, talk about Salesforce. That was like their original thing that Mark Benioff literally had to convince the world,
yep.
like, you don't need to install CRM software in a closet in your office anymore. Just open a web browser and use it. And that was an utterly foreign concept to people. That was why they had that, that no software. I know I don't
Right.
need to tell you this. Maybe some of your listeners, might have been like
We'll put
children
it in the
back then.
show notes.
It was so long ago. Um, um, but first they had to convince, well, not first, but one of the things they had to convince is, oh, use a web-based UI, and then it's portable anywhere. You don't need to install any software. You can enable access for your entire company very easily. Blah 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 blah. Then APIs were another one. You just brought it up of like, oh, if you need to build a custom application or a custom integration, that's very, very difficult because then you're having to talk like, hardcore engineer to hardcore engineer to build this thing. Oh, we'll solve that with APIs, and there'll just be we'll put some documentation out there, and you don't need as nearly as a sophisticated of a developer to build custom, applications, because we're going to put all the most common and useful functionality as API calls, and that's going to be very easy for everybody to integrate. But to your point, you publish the API and you're still got to book meetings with people and you still run into friction. And so it's like the world of SaaS, despite its best efforts, just literally has not been able to make that problem go away. They have thrown everything at that problem of just human friction, and it has not gone away. It's just been persistent because the number of companies has exploded, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think it's another thing that's just gonna AI is really has a huge opportunity because there's this whole category of software, SaaS as we know it,
Mm.
especially web-based SaaS with web UIs, has just been unable to decomplexify itself over the course of roughly 25-ish years. It just hasn't been able to achieve that. It's thrown, like I said, the web UIs, the APIs, all of it, and just hasn't happened. And AI may swoop in and say, all right, well, you guys weren't able to figure this out, so we got a completely new paradigm for how to do software.
Am I characterizing what you're saying fairly to say that we should not assume that the marketing leadership in most organizations is happy with the state of things? On the contrary, most of them are unhappy, and that the if they saw tearing down some of the technology and ridding
Yeah.
themselves of some of the debt with that technology were an option, they would take a good look at it.
Oh, yes. I mean, I've seen things, demos of, AI enabled software from startups that are currently kind of in their infancy, as most of the startups in that space are, because it's all so new. And I've seen sort of outputs from this software, and I don't want to give away too many details because they were sharing things under in confidence. But I've seen things where the AI output, and I point at it and I say, a marketer, let's just say a CMO,
Sure.
to be very general, a CMO would pay upwards of $500,000 and 6 to 9 months to get what you just put on the screen after running your AI model over something. And it doesn't mean that the output is maybe as good or superior. It's actually moot whether it's better or worse. If it's roughly as good or appears to be as good or gives the customer, the CMO, a similar level of confidence in that they've done the right thing, then that's fine. That's the litmus test. There's no empirical measure whether the output actually was better or worse, especially when you're
No, but
it.
I'm hearing you say they'll sell the cow in exchange for
It,
the magic beans.
Yeah, but if you took that to a CMO and say, well, you can have this for $50,000 instead of 500,000 plus, and this thing will take, I mean, there's maybe some setup and stuff, so maybe overall the thing takes a couple of weeks, as
Right.
opposed to 6 months to 12 months. You'd be working with this consultancy and they dump this 250 slide deck in your lap at the end. Which would you rather? The CMO is going to be like, let's try the $50,000 thing, because what you're telling me, and you did the demo, and this looks like it's a huge shortcut to getting the thing I'm currently spending tons of time and money on, which, as we all know, this is how industries get disrupted. Is there's a thing that costs, X,
Yeah.
and then some new technology comes and
Drops
says,
a
well, you
zero
can do
off.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll drop a zero off it, and everybody's like, they pile into the new thing, and the old thing dies.
Wow. We probably could keep going on the tech side, but we don't want to leave folks like the ad platforms and the agencies out of this. So we're going to get
Nope.
to those, but first we're going to take a really quick break.
All right.
Let me step away for a second to note the information that goes beyond what you're listening to now. I'm talking about our social media presence. On social, you'll see show-related updates about our guests. You'll see what's happening behind the scenes. Or you can simply talk to me. There are already 740 people who have connected with the show's social pages. I love seeing new people follow, and I've really loved how lately a few of you have posted positive comments about the show. It encourages me in making this podcast the best it can be. So find Funnel Reboot on LinkedIn or Instagram or X. Click follow and maybe say hi. Thanks a lot. Let's get back to the show. Myles, you spent some time in large agencies, and you've also, of course, then been dealing quite closely with some of the major app platforms. I would imagine Google, Meta, perhaps Microsoft, and others. There are things in flux in this universe too. What are some of the things that you see that are really shaking things up over in that area?
Well, I mean, if we're going to continue with the theme of AI, I think AI is going to it's going to allow the agencies to absolutely reinvent themselves from a standpoint of operational costs. Um,
Yes.
and one of the things that I learned working at an agency, so I was at Media Monks, and it's the only agency that I've ever worked for. But I was there for a number of years, and that was just hugely enlightening to work for an agency. Is that an agency an agency's job is to say yes, because they inherently exist to take on all the work that clients don't want for themselves. If a client really wanted to take on work that it was giving to an agency, it would go out and it would hire the people. And this is what in-house marketers do: is they say, no, we don't want the agency to do this anymore. We want to do it. We're going to quote unquote go in-house. When you hire an agency, by definition, you don't want to do that. You don't want to be doing this work. You want someone else to do it. You want to make these problems someone else's problem. I need to generate creative. I need to generate a media plan. I need to buy the media. I need to measure the media. I need to connect my ad tech and martech systems all together. I don't want to do any of this as a CMO. This
Or
isn't my.
I don't want the fixed costs of the
Yeah,
staff
yeah,
that it would
exactly.
take to do it.
Yeah, because doing those things comes with a ton of baggage. And I, as a CMO, I don't want that baggage. I'm gonna find an agency that will take all this baggage off of my hands. And agencies then, if they're to hold up sort of their end of the bargain as the baggage takers, they have to say yes to as much as they can. Otherwise, the CMO says, look, I got a lot of baggage, and if you're not going to take it, I'm going to find a different partner who will. Because I can't parcel out my baggage to 100 different partners. I got to have a small set of partners. I can't manage too many of you. And so anyway, that's a very interesting dynamic on the inside of an agency, working for a business whose job is to say yes, because if you've worked at businesses that have a more, I guess, constrained scope of what they do. Like if you're a tech company, your job is not to say yes. Your job is to pick like literally one thing to say yes to and optimize that thing and dial that thing in until it's a cash machine and say no to literally everything else. That's your job as a tech company. Agency, total opposite. It's
Yes.
to minimize what you're saying no to and say yes to as much as you can. And so there's nothing inherently better or worse from either of those models. They're just diametrically opposed in terms of the sort of underlying philosophy and commercial model. And so, like you think about the productivity revolution that we may be about to undergo with AI and agencies. The amount that they're going to be able to say yes to is going to absolutely explode, and it's already high. The
Yes.
agencies already are taking on. I mean, they have a lot of problems like earning margins. The RFP process is totally broken. Like the agency business is a tough business, and though they are just going to glom onto AI and say, we want to just 10x what we can say yes to,
Right.
because if we can
Our
turn,
full service
yeah,
just became even fuller. Yes.
yeah, because if we can add just a couple percentage points to our margins by saying yes to 10x more work, we're gonna be all about it. And so, um, I
Okay.
think
Are
it's just
there
it's,
any
it's gonna be a really interesting
qualifiers?
time.
Do you
Yeah,
think that's going to be across the board, or would you say, well, wait a minute, if the agency is, for example, stuck in the utilization of one billable hour of a person's time, or
yeah,
if the agency is part of a hold co and
yeah,
they cannot deviate even for a month on what numbers they were bound
yeah,
to, like
yeah.
in those cases,
Ye-
no, this is not going to be the land of milk and honey for them.
Yes, I think you're totally right, and those are great points. And I think it's we end up in a situation very much like the tech landscape, where there's going to be disruptors who can shave zeros off of costs and sort of are going to vacuum up, hoover up large amounts of market share with that kind of a value prop. Because yeah, that's another thing about the agency model, is it's very much sort of a butts and seats billable hours kind of model. And what does AI do to that? I think you don't reduce the number of billable hours. You just, like I said, say yes to more. So the billable hours stay the same or go up. Hopefully they go up.
Yep.
If they don't go up, then the agency's not really incentivized to kind of like turn themselves upside down internally. But you actually end up billing your clients for more stuff. It just is sort of like, well, we're going to bill you 2x for 10x the output. Those are extreme numbers, but like,
Uh-huh. Yep.
your billings are going to go up, but the value you're getting is just going to absolutely skyrocket. So like that's one thing to consider, is like the agencies aren't just going to massively lay people off, because yeah, their ability to bill hours would then go down, and that they would just be shooting themselves in the foot. The other thing is, yeah, you end up with the flip side of sort of the same thing with, like, say, the community of MarTech users, where these people aren't just going to sort of like hand over the keys to AI and fire themselves. Like they're going to find ways, they're going to remain involved. And I think the same thing is going to play out um, um, at agencies, where they'll figure out how to incorporate AI with the people that they've already got. Those people are just going to be doing more, where somebody who's a media planner has, maybe now they have two clients, maybe in the future with AI they have six. And that's how that math is going to net out. You're not going to fire half your media planners. You're just going to double the workload of the ones that you've got, because they're going to be so much more productive.
Right, but even in that example you just gave, I can imagine that there will be uh, different rates at which they are
Yes.
moving. This
Ye-
will, like in a large holdco type
mhm.
group of agencies, I can see within the network, like the media buyer may be zooming along at a very fast clip, but I can see just the dissemination of the advantage, coming slower in maybe
Y-
creative or in other,
Yeah.
forms of
I,
of traffic and production, and
yep.
it's going to make it look to the client like the vendor is lurching. They're
Y-
like
y-
having these growing pains, and they are not going to seem like a finely tuned symphony where everything is in harmony.
Yeah. So like agencies have very they have thin margins and they're very much operating on I don't know what the financial term for it would be, but like they're not sitting on piles of capital that they can invest into sort of new technology, infrastructure, process, et cetera. They're like literally living month to month at an agency.
And there
They
isn't
have
just one of them. They have all different little P&Ls.
oh yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
each
you've got
one is
tons of little yeah,
clutching onto their own P&L for all they're
yeah,
worth.
yeah. Every P you've got a yeah, exactly. You've got a tons of little
Decentralized.
P&Ls all living month to month, and so none of them can ever accumulate the capital required to say transition to AI. And let's say that that would take 3 years when a massive capital outlay. And 3 years would probably be like ambitious, but whatever, we'll pick a random number. And massive capital outlay over 3 years. So, like for an agency, that's really tough because they probably don't have the operating income to fund that. So then they would need to they would need to take out debt or raise money in the capital markets, which like probably a lot of agencies will do. But then you get into, and this is, I'm not like a holdco expert, but that is part of, I think, the entire philosophy behind holding companies is that you can have some shared uh, a capital outlay that could be
Yep.
shared across businesses so that you're not having to have all of these little P&Ls have to fend for themselves 100%. And so I don't know enough about what's going on in the agency world as to which of the holdcos might be best positioned to transition to AI, who basically have their SHIT together enough to coordinate that capital outlay into AI, build that technology, and then share it out to all of their subsidiary agencies over time. And so that everybody gets steadily leveled up. And so I literally don't know. I mean, hopefully some of them will be able to manage that transition, and surely some of them just won't, because it's a big ask for an agency.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of seeing the same thing that we were talking about earlier. We have multiple constituencies. It seems that some of them are either entrenched or they can move, but they're going to have to like rearrange some foundational elements in order to get there. So it's not going to come quickly. And the other grenade I'll lob into this is
Nah.
I'm thinking particularly of on the media side ad platform actors themselves. So I'm thinking of the gargantuans, the Googles, the Metas.
Hmm.
They, from my perspective, they have been um, demanding that everyone downstream of them uses what they have been building in order to get their AI SHIT together. So they have been
Hmm.
demanding the latest tags be installed, demanding that the latest amount of uh, privacy protocols and sharing of internal system data, hashing, making sure that the latencies are tidied up, that the web serving is fast, all of these things. And they can just like issue fiats, it seems,
Hmm.
at the agencies and downstream to say, well, just do it. And so where that's got to take some margin to do.
Uh, yeah, I mean, they. I mean, this is why they're all under antitrust scrutiny right now.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, that and
but
a little bit of dirty pool,
yeah,
like, rigging an auction.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean it's they we've got sort of a winner take most whatever outcome at this point of 30 years of digital. We've
Yeah.
as most markets do, we've got a winner take most situation. Regulations haven't caught up to that because digital happens so fast. And surely regulations will catch up. But yeah, you're talking about, say between Meta and Google, like, yeah, Meta's got a captive audience of, I don't know how many users does it have now, 2 billion, 2.5 billion, 3 billion across
Let's go with
Facebook,
that.
Instagram.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know what they, that's a lot of people. And so it's like,
Well, at the point where they're practically maxed out on the planet,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I
no,
mean,
exactly.
the
There's,
next
there's,
the next group of people, we need to give them phones in
yeah,
order for
yeah,
them to
yeah,
be
yeah.
be Facebook clients.
Yeah, which I swear we've all read headlines about Zuckerberg funding this thing or that thing to make sure that people have a mobile device. They've got wireless
Right.
network data out in the middle of nowhere, et cetera, et cetera. Um, um, yeah, no, but they've got everybody over a barrel because Meta, in their case, they've got all of the eyeballs. Google has a lot of eyeballs, but then the other thing with Google, in terms of their ad stack, is they have this isn't necessarily something I would have predicted, and you might not have predicted it having looked at something like the Lumascape or the Martech landscape 10 or 15 years ago, that they're sort of the last man standing in terms of like a full stack. Like if you want a full Martech ad tech stack, like they're literally the only company that makes that. And so when they say, oh well, we're going to do XYZ with GA, or or we're doing XYZ with Chrome or whatever it is, it's like, what other choice do you have? Otherwise, you got to completely upend your stack strategy as a customer of like, all right, well, we went with the full stack vendor, and now we have to go completely to the other end of the spectrum and make our own stack, and that comes with tons of baggage. And do we really want that hassle? Nah, let's just do whatever Google's asking us to do, or make it our agency's problem. I
Yeah,
I don't want to
but
hear about it.
I mean,
You guys solve it.
we've seen many times okay, well, we could go on any cloud provider, but if we go with Google Cloud, the Google Ads, which is what we really care about, will play nice with that
Yeah,
information that loops back. So we it's a tail wagging the dog kind of phenomenon.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it will, I know you have gone on record making predictions that these cloud systems will be gobbling up the
Hmm.
smaller martech players who, even though they do one part of the stack really well, they cannot, it's not tenable for them up against Google, where their engineers behind the scenes have so tightly integrated those tools that
Yeah.
the outside company goes, I don't care if I'm giving over to a monopoly, I just have to have that.
Well, it's almost. I mean, this is the funny thing about monopolies is from the client side. It's not that clients demand monopolies. Like clients
No.
don't like monopolies because then they get held hostage by monopolies. But in a certain sense, they want monopolies because they're like, oh, well, can I just pile more problems into one vendor? Because right now I got 50 vendors. That means I got 50 problems that I got to, that's a lot of calls. That's a lot of people I got to hire to manage this. If you can, the more work you can take on, tech platform or agency, it
Or you
reduces the
just,
scope of my problems.
yeah, you make it opaque to me, and it's a terrible comparison, but it is true that before World War II happened, you would find folks on the street in parts of Italy saying, well, Mussolini is making the trains run on time.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, there's a total kind of like
Like
whatever
the
devil's
convenience,
bargain.
Yeah,
Right.
we
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
shrug.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
well.
and I think cloud is going to play a big role in Martech and ad tech consolidation in the next couple of years because again, going back to this whole thing or thought about a paradigm shift from humans pressing buttons inside of point solutions, like web UI point solutions, to something else. So if you consider that approach generally can't scale forever, like there's a certain point at which clients can't buy any more of those systems. Agencies even can't manage any more of those systems. We have as many web-based UIs as the market can really manage. Cloud offers a pretty different approach. It doesn't mean that nobody needs to be pushing buttons anywhere, But so many things now can happen on a sort of cloud service to cloud service basis
Right.
without having to pass through someone's proprietary UI. And I think that is going to really allow the cloud platforms, namely Amazon, Google, and Microsoft,
Yep.
to incrementally gobble up a ton of stuff because they're going to be able to point to whatever the diagram of the tech stack and say, well, you got this proprietary SaaS solution here, you got this proprietary SaaS solution here, you got this proprietary SaaS solution here, and at maybe even both ends, you've got cloud. Well, guess what? We just introduced a new service onto the cloud platform, and you actually
Yep.
don't need any of those UIs anymore. The whole thing can go from cloud to cloud, no web UI button pushing needed anymore, or at least
If
what buttons
and
need to
if
be
and
pushed
if I'm
can be
and if
pushed in the
I'm
cloud.
That's right. And if I'm getting nickeled and dimed whenever there is data being transferred across between systems, that's a pretty compelling argument that we're cutting down on
Ye-
that.
Yeah, exactly. Because cloud is for the most part usage based, and so everybody's all up in arms now about kind of converting to a more usage based system, which again is very antithetical to the practical realities of SaaS pricing. SaaS pricing is almost priced assuming that you're not going to use it. It's priced for underutilization. It's like, we're
Yeah.
going to get you to sign the contract, big promises, amazing marketing, and you're going to get a license and you're going to have trouble using the thing. You might not even use it for the first 6 to 12 months because you're trying to get your act together internally, but you already signed the contract. So,
Right. Right.
thanks for your money.
And that's right. Our high margin business thanks you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that high multiple that you've just given us. Um, so while you and I have, kind of like you do in the barber chair, just, gone ahead and spouted off on all the things that we are railing against, I know that you have some particular, not prescriptive solutions, but you've got some helpful ways that we can at least maybe lower our anxiety with all of the changes that are going along. Or maybe that we can reduce the friction with our colleagues where we seem to be
Yeah.
in these towers of Babel where none of us seem to understand what the others are saying. What what do you suggest we at least try so that we can see our way through these times?
Well, my own personal sort of dog in this fight is, I work for U of Digital. We're a training and education partner for the digital marketing, advertising, media ecosystem broadly, and what we help learners with, and I personally experienced this, is we really help them develop strategic, landscape level, ecosystem level context as to what's going on. So, in support of our clients' go-to-market strategies, if constituency A really needs to be able to talk to constituency B in order to make the strategy work out in a timely fashion, we help facilitate that. We don't do tools level training. We tend to stay away from that
Right.
because then you really do end up in that Tower of Babel situation where, you're not going to teach all the executives how to use Google Analytics. That's not a productive use of anybody's time, but
No,
helping
but
them
but you
understand. Yeah,
you do point out though that like what companies do right now to get over that rough patch is they go grab a
yeah,
subject matter expert.
yeah,
And that's like
eh,
worse because this is a expensive person. They have
yeah,
spent decades in this. They may
yep.
even be, in the curse of knowledge where they can't even remember what it was like to not know what they know. So, are they able to explain it?
Yeah,
Or, now they're kind of like, you know, standing there tap dancing, expected to know the answer to everything, like it's a game of Jeopardy. This is not
yeah.
tenable, right? We can't we
No, and
can't use SMEs as our bridge between just ordinary people working in the business who don't understand. The answer is to get those people to understand at least to a modicum of knowledge
yes,
so that everyone can function.
yes, yeah, and the approach that U of Digital takes is we take that. Clearly the thirst for knowledge exists. It's currently being served in many companies um, by these internal subject matter experts, these internal explainers, if you will. I think the tap dancing analogy is apt. If you talk to these people, Glenn, you may be one of these people, and you probably know many of these people. They'll say, like, yeah, it does feel like tap dancing. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like the expectation is that I'm going to be this oracle who's going to have sort of a cogent answer to literally every esoteric tech or ecosystem question that comes up, and it's not
I
tenable. And
have
so we take a more
flashcards with each of those 3-letter acronyms, right? I'm
yeah, yeah, yeah,
poring over those every night.
yeah, yeah, and it's very not tenable, but that seems to be the sort of informal solution that much of the industry has agreed upon.
Yeah.
And we take a more systematic approach where we U of Digital has we manage the U of Digital expert network where we can pool this expertise together into an expert network, help set up systematic education for our clients, and solve the same problem but in a much more systematic fashion and without having to completely exhaust um, um, these internal explainers who are just being pulled in a million different directions. And yeah, it all stems from the the level of complexity that we have reached as an industry, that, like I said, there are no longer enough waking hours in a human lifetime to
Yeah.
deeply understand every technology, meaning you can't go and read the documentation of every single thing in order to essentially, I guess another way of putting it, we've gotten past the point where any one person can develop a bottoms up picture of the MarTech landscape, the ad tech landscape. You can still develop a top down one, especially if you specialize for the thing that you're trying to accomplish and develop a top down understanding of that portion of it. And
Right.
that's what we help our clients do. But you can't go bottoms up anymore. And it comes from complexity. And then it also comes from the getting back to what, how you opened up the discussion is the fact that there are so many different vectors of convergence and disruption right now that for our clients and frankly everybody in the industry, they come to us saying, they don't put it this way, but this is what they're saying. They say, we're being pushed outside of our comfort zone, or we have this set of teams that is being pushed outside of their comfort zone. They've done one thing for the last 5, 10, 15 years, and they're very good at it, but the world has changed. And now they need to get good at this next thing. And we as a business, our survival as a business depends on these people getting good at the new thing, or learning this new thing that their bailiwick is now overlapping with. A cloud is a great example. That's cloud is now overlapping with a bunch of stuff it never used to overlap with. And
Right.
so, sort of being conversant in basic cloud concepts is now important. Whereas 5, 10 years ago, unless you were a cloud engineer or cloud developer, you didn't need to know anything about AWS or GCP or Azure.
The fact that we are disoriented and that even experts among us agree on that, um, I think that's actually a little more anchoring than if someone were to tell me there are courses out there where I could learn it all and
Yeah.
and I'll be at a good place at the end. Not true. Uh, rate of change is
Yeah.
continuing, but I do find it a little comforting to go, you know what? We're going to let you know that, yeah, the change is still at a fever pitch, but we're all in this together. Some of us
Hmm.
know a little bit more than others. Nobody
Yep.
knows it all, but that's okay. You're good.
It is okay. I mean, this is the thing with being in an education business that deals with strategic level knowledge for business users is it is shocking how helpful everyone basically is walking around with. It's not imposter syndrome. It's basically the assumption that your expertise isn't enough or it doesn't rise to an expert level. Whereas when you put that person who doesn't necessarily consider themselves to be some genius level expert, when you put that person in front of a classroom of business users who have almost no knowledge of that domain, to them, that person is a genius. And is an hour with them is in immensely helpful in advancing their confidence in a particular domain area.
And once those discussions are had, and I'll just throw in the musical chair analogy because it may be you this time and it may be someone else another
Yeah.
time, that becomes comforting to realize, oh, all
Yes.
right. So the game here is not to be the last one standing. The game here is
No.
for each of us to have enough lingua franca that we can
Yes.
all get business done
Yep.
to a good enough level, and hopefully keep our sanity in the process.
Yeah. I mean, we're trying to shift attitudes around that, and it becomes clearer to me every day that the sort of original, I don't know, original, but sort of long-standing tech premise that you have these galaxy brain people who, maybe Elon Musk before he bought Twitter, but that's his reputation has really suffered. But the Bill Gates, Elon Musk, people
Right.
like this who are these
Technical
galaxy
co-founder.
brain,
Yeah.
yeah, these galaxy brain people, and the rest of us, sort of, plebes, kind of started holding ourselves to that standard. And it was always a myth, but
Yep. Yep.
but B, it's literally not achievable. It's a boil the ocean kind of an aspiration. It's a meaningless aspiration, and we as a company, You Have Digital, I personally want to be part of changing that. To your echo what you were saying, that it's like, no, it's okay to not know everything, because you can't. So focus on what you need to know at the depth of knowledge that you need to know it, and then find a systematic way to address that.
Yeah. And that's a great note to end on, that we don't have to drive ourselves to distraction. Myles, if people want to find out more about You Have Digital, or maybe connect with you, see what you're up to, where can they go?
So I am very findable on LinkedIn and the web, but I invite everybody to go to U of Digital site, uof.digital. We put out a weekly newsletter that I invite everybody to sign up for. That's uof.digital/newsletters. And yeah, we look forward to hearing from your listeners. That'll be fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know that you left us with a lot that we can use to make ourselves better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.